So when you're solving a quadratic, it's not all that complicated. One of the things that, in one case, it can actually be pretty easy to solve. So right here, when you have no b term, when you just have ax squared in c, the best way to do this is actually using square roots, okay? And so just take the square root and multiply of both sides, simplify the radical, make sure you put plus and minus on the outside. Okay, so for our first one, we have x squared minus 64. I don't have to go through and factor. I can get the x by itself. So I can actually add 64 to each side. So I have x squared equals 64. Now, the question is, what you're going to end up doing is you're going to take the square root of each side, but you have to remember that there are two possibilities for this number right here. I could plug in positive 8 or I could plug in negative 8. And so my answer is actually going to be plus or minus 8. Okay, so don't forget this. Okay, don't forget your plus or minus. You have two solutions. Okay, and we'll talk about that, the reasoning behind that. Okay, for this one here, I would add 9 because I want to get my x squared by itself. So that's going to be 2x squared is equal to 64. Divide by 2. X squared is equal to 32. Then you take the square root. So x is equal to plus or minus radical 32. Now you need to make sure you simplify the radical. So in this case, 32, if I go through, divided by 2 is 16, divided by 2 is 8, divided by 2 is 4, divided by 2 is 2, divided by 2 is 1. So I know that I'm going to take, this is going to be plus or minus, I'm going to take two 2's out, and I'm left with radical 32. I'm left with a 2 on the inside. And so it's going to be x is equal to plus or minus 4 radical 2. Let's try this again with a couple others. So I'm just going to do just 2 more examples for this because I'm trying to make these a little bit shorter. For this one, I would subtract 1 because I want to get my x squared by itself. It's equal to negative 40. I multiply each side by negative 2. These would divide out. I'd end up with just a 1 here because negative 2 times negative 1/2 is 1, or just x squared is equal to positive 80. Then I take the square root of each side. X is equal to plus or minus radical 80, and I just have to simplify. 80 divided by 2 is 40, 40 divided by 2 is 20, 20 divided by 2 is 10, 10 divided by 2 is 5, 5 divided by 5 is 1. So I have 2 2's on the outside, a radical 5 on the inside. So it's going to be plus or minus 4 radical 5. Let's just try one more. Okay, this one here, I subtract 15 from each side. So this is going to be 4x squared. Negative 9 minus 15 is going to be negative 24. I divide by 4, divide by 4. X squared is equal to negative 6. I take the square root of each side. X is equal to plus or minus radical negative 6. You cannot have a negative underneath a radical there, so what you need to make sure you do is you take an I out. I can't simplify 6 anymore, so x is going to be equal to plus or minus I radical 6. I'm going to do this one over here just to show you what I mean. I'm going to subtract 81 from each side. X squared equals negative 81. Take the square root of each side. X is equal to plus or minus radical negative 81. 81, some of you guys know the square root of 81 is 9, but I also have to remember that I have my I here. So I know it's going to be plus or minus. I know that there's going to be an I in my answer. 81 divided by 3 is 27, divided by 3 is 9, divided by 3 is 3, divided by 3 is 1. So I know it's going to be 2 3s on the outside. But those of you that know the shortcut, your answer here would just be 9i. So don't forget the I if there's a negative underneath your radical.